Okay guys, let's talk about some pros and cons, and I didn't even start my channel properly. Yo! Welcome back to Containing Luxury. On this episode, we're actually going to be discussing the pros and cons of Insofast. Let's get started. This was actually the first time I was able to use Insofast on an entire build. This is only a 20 foot container, so it's not our 40 foot container. And that's gonna actually come into play with the pros and cons. Insofast did not pay me, I actually paid. I did call them and asked them if they would be willing to donate panels since this is a giveaway. They gave me a little bit of a discount and free shipping. But in no way, I paid for this whole system. I'll tell you right now, I paid about $1,600 for everything. If I start with some of the pros, the fact that it's insulation and framing in one, pretty nice pro. If you're a skilled framer, it's really going to be a little bit frustrating at first because you're really fast at framing. I could probably frame this whole 20 foot container in maybe 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours. So learning something new was a little bit difficult, which might be on a con, but let's keep going with pros. So pros is they lock together pretty nice. It's really nice. You're doing your insulation and your framing all in one. So if you're do-it-yourselfer, this would probably be the way to go. It is pretty expensive, but when you break down the math, it actually is a pro slightly when it comes to the cost. And how I mean that is I got a quote from my buddy who owns a spray foam company to come in and spray foam this entire container. It was a higher R value than what Insofast provided, but it was the exact same cost for him to come in and spray foam as I purchased the entire kit for. Now, that's not factoring, I had to take the time to put all of this in, and he was going to take care of it with his company, so I wouldn't have had to done anything, and I would have paid the same amount of money. So I saved myself just the cost of the metal is really what it comes down to, because I still had labor involved with doing this system. So, and let's say once I get fast at it, I can use this system just as fast as I can metal frame. So, with that being said, my watch stops dinging. So then all I've really saved myself is the material cost of the metal. Now, on my last build, that was about $700. On something a little bit smaller like this, let's call it like $500. So realistically, I did save myself approximately $500 in the cost of the metal. I've saved myself a little bit of money, and I think it's an easier process if you don't have a lot of the tools and you don't have framing experience. This is probably the way to go for a do-it-yourselfer. Some of the other pros is it's a pretty tight, like if you didn't have access to a spray foam, I don't think you're probably going to get anything where it's going to be as sealed as well as what I have here. I mean, everything is butted up nice and tight. I've spray foamed anything as I locked it together. So I have a really well sealed quality R value that's probably fairly accurate to what they say. Now, if you were cutting yourself foam board and you were doing foam board inserts, you're probably going to have little gaps. You're not really getting much of that R value. So I think as far as a do-it-yourselfer and for an alternative to spray foam, this is probably one of your best options. Once I started kind of getting the hang of it, I'm like, okay, maybe I could knock out quite a few of these. Once I get my system in place and I set up all my tools. But for a one build, it was a little bit frustrating, especially since I'm doing a 20 foot. So now let's get to, another part of one of the pros. I think this system would work a little bit better on a larger scale, because when every single one of your panels, I probably had to cut 50% of my panels. So that's kind of frustrating when you can't get a single full piece in. So I have a lot of windows, and I have, I don't know, actually it was just a lot of cuts in here. So on a 40 foot, I probably would have had some room to actually start putting in some full pieces. It would have gone a little bit faster, and I really would have seen like, okay, I'm smoking through this. Especially if you were doing the outside and you didn't have, a lot of window penetrations, that might be the way to go on that. if you are skilled and you're going to be doing your own electrical and stuff, there are little raceways built in so you can kind of fish some wires. My one con is those raceways are only large enough to fit maybe two sleeves of Romex through there. And I think even then it would be really tough to like try and fish them through. A lot of my designs, like in my kitchen, I have 3 independent home run circuits. So that means, oh my gosh, let me put my phone on silent. In my kitchen designs, I have 3 independent circuits. So each one of those circuits has a home run back to the panel, which means I have to pull at least 3 Romex lines through that little, and there's no way you're fitting it. It's way too small. I would rip apart all the insulation trying to get it through there. And I wouldn't, it kind of defeats the purpose to have to like cut out huge sections and fish all the pipe and then spray foam it back. Then I think I would have rather just have framed it, run all my electrical, and have a spray foam company come in and spray foam everything, and I know it's all super sealed. That would just be faster. So, but if you're doing this system yourself and you're do-it-yourselfer, it's your first time ever doing any insulation, framing, electrical, and it's got a real basic design, I think then this is probably the way to go. If you're a builder and you're only going to be doing 1 or 2 of these, you might get so frustrated because you already know how to frame fast and you already have a spray foam company that you might get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm just going to do it the other way. If they reduce the price a little bit, I think, then it would really make it a little bit, as a contractor, I would be looking at it as maybe more of an alternative. But because it's so close to the same price, it's going to cost me more in an electrician coming in here than it is the little bit I saved on framing, because if I just have frame walls, my electrician's going to be smoking, running through wire all over the place, mounting boxes and covering and good to go. So those guys are really expensive. It's going to cost me more on the back end than what I saved on this. Now, definitely another pro is if you're not doing a shipping container and this is going in your like basement or concrete walls, how do you get faster than that? Literally glue right against your flat wall, and like in a basement where you're not gonna have tons of plumbing and electrical running everywhere, this is super fast then. So, if that's definitely somewhere I would for sure use these, where they make a ton of sense. I think when I get into a 40-foot container and I can put more full pieces in, I think it's not going to be as frustrating, but I'm not kidding when I say at least 50% of the pieces I put in here, I had to cut and modify and do a bunch of stuff. And that kind of gets me into actually one of my cons, just for where I am, is the R value actually doesn't meet our wall or ceiling codes. So I would have to add, and actually Insofast sent a bunch of instructions that telling me how I can increase the R value, but I was gonna have to go buy other insulation boards and put them up on top of this, or frame a whole substructure and then put that fiberglass insulation in addition to it. And that's where I was like, okay, well, I'm definitely not gonna do any of that. If I was gonna do that, then I should have just paid and spray foamed it. So, because my buddy's quote for $1,400 was R30 on the attics or the ceiling space, and Insofast I believe is an R13, and here in Florida we're R19 minimum. And then on our walls we're supposed to be R13, and the walls I believe, I'll have to look, but I think they were only R11. So I'm definitely gonna have to add something else on the outside to reduce the heat load to make that the ceiling and the walls work in here. I definitely don't want to add it in addition to this on the inside, because these panels, you can kind of see how thick that is. That's the ceiling, and the walls are relatively thick as well. So I've already lost a decent amount of my interior space. I definitely don't want to add that additional insulation or add framing over this and then insulate it and then put whatever my finished wallboard is. I'm really gonna start shrinking this. So I think on an exterior application, I think this is great for the inside. as like my base layer of getting this thing insulated from the inside, getting everything super tight. I can definitely tell it's cooler in here today than it was yesterday. But then once I get to the outside, I'm gonna probably add some cool wood products and maybe some additional foam board or something that's gonna get me to that R value that I really need to achieve. Then again, you know, my first build, I used products that the R value technically does not make sense on paper, but by using all these different air voids, it's super energy efficient inside that thing. So maybe once we get some air conditioning in here and we can really put this thing to a test, I'll be able to kind of go back on some of that and be like, whoa, you know what, that R11 is perfect for this thing, and you know, R30, I don't even need to touch the outside. So some of these things, you know, it's gonna kind of evolve, and on a new container, definitely a lot easier. I don't think the system would have worked on my first container. Mine was too beat up. But then again, some used containers are, you know, going to be in better shape, and if yours is really bad, then you may not want to, you know, try to use Insofast, because if there's huge dents and stuff, you really need these grooves with adhesive have to be touching the metal, or then you're not fastening to anything and it's gonna freaking, you know, fall off. But on the new containers, it's like super fast. And one thing I found is I'm using a lot more new containers in my designs because the price difference is so minimal. I would much rather go with a new than used. But for the most part, everything else kind of came together. It did take me 2 full days to do this. It was a little bit of time, but yeah, overall, great product, great idea. I would be a little bit torn between whether or not I'll do it again on my, you know, say I'm building 50 of these things and I'm hammering them out. I think I would probably buy a spray foam rig. If I'm building, you know, 1 or 2 of these, I'm do-it-yourselfer or even a contractor, I think it's worth giving it a shot. Yeah, that's it. That's all I got. We hope this video has been useful, and if it has, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and we'll catch you guys on the next one, right? Maybe, probably, hopefully. Container Luxury, out!